Chairman, we're now live.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Eastern Area Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Alan McCrow and I'm Chairman of the committee. The other members present this evening are Janine Lewis, Justin Pemberton, Vicky Poole, Paul Kander, Clive Taylor and Chris Reid. We have officers in attendance to assist us and support the meeting. Simon Till, who's the team manager, development and planning. Gemma Kirk, Senior Planning Officer, Alice Atwood, Senior Planning Officer, Paul Goddard, Team Leader, Highways Development Control, John Thomas, Senior Tree Officer, Thea Nolly, Senior Paralegal, Jess Bayliss, Clerk, and Thomas Redbourne, who is acting as the Zoom host. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please could I ask everybody present in the chamber to make sure you switch on your microphones when invited to speak directly into them and to switch them off when you've finished. Can I also ask you to make sure you put your mobile phones to silent and to turn the sound off on your laptops. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, you must leave the building immediately. Please proceed via the safe emergency exit and please follow any instructions given by the officers. The assembly point is the car park of the Dolphin Pub. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it's safe to proceed. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will proceed this evening, please? Thank you. First of all, item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, Chairman. So I've received apologies from Councillors Jeremy Cottam, Jeff Mays, Richard Somner and Ross McKinnon, with Councillor Janine Lewis subbing for Jeremy Cottam and Councillor Chris Reid subbing for Jeff Mays.
Thank you. Item 2 is the minutes of the last meeting held on the 4th of September. Do any members wish to make any amendments? Councillor Pemberton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. According to those minutes, I declared a personal interest by virtue of the fact that I used to live in the property next door to the application site. I don't recognise those comments, so I don't know if it was.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So, are there any other comments, please? Could I have a proposal then with that amendment to delete that passage that we could approve the minutes? Councillor Pemberton, thank you. The seconder, please. Councillor Kander, thank you very much. Those in favour, please. Anybody against? Okay, thank you. That motion is passed. Thank you. Move on then to item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to make any declarations this evening, please? Well, Councillor Poole first.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to declare a notice for the first item. I'm down at Silham Hampstead. It borders my ward and I hold a counsellor surgery at the Willink every first, at the Burfield Library. And I quite regularly get visitors or members from the Bradfield ward coming to see me for help. This application hasn't been discussed during my counsellor surgeries. However, I wish to declare that I do live within a very close proximity to that application.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
I'm the ward member for, sorry, yes. Ward member for Pelly Park Trust item that's coming up, item 4. Also declare an interest in Pinsent's Lane. There is a specific word for that. Thea, could you help me out, please? Predisposition.
I'm sorry?
I am predisposed for that item. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so you presumably not be taking part in the debate or vote?
No.
But presumably you will be addressing the committee on the item, will you?
No, I'm going to keep quiet.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, also in respect of agenda item 4 to the application for the land east of Pinsent's, Lane, I've already spoken to officers and that's had some advice on this. I believe I may be considered predetermined on this application, and indeed that I may be perceived to be predetermined as well. Therefore, I don't intend to sit on the committee for the debate and vote on that application, though I will speak as the ward councillor and also as a representative of Tylehurst Parish Council.
Thank you. I also have an interest to declare in that I received a telephone call from the agents for the Princess Hill application, asking whether they could send an email to all members. So I think there's probably a declaration of interest for everybody, because I presume everybody received it. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Paul, Councillor Kanda, sorry.
So I'm also a ward member for the Purley Park. I have no predisposition or anything, but just to state that.
Thank you. Let me move on then to item 4, and the first item the first application to be discussed this evening, 24/00533 /MAJ, Oakdown Fields, Shortheath Lane, Solomstead. Could I ask Gemma Kirk, please, to give % on this item?
Thank you, Chairman. The application before committee is at Oakdown Fields, Shortheath Lane, Solhampstead. The application is a section 73A, which seeks to make minor amendments to conditions on the original permission 21/03260 COMIND. The original permission granted a change of use of land to equestrian with the erection of a stable blockyard, a manege, creation of an associated access and retention of 4 temporary field shelters and mobile stable units on skids. The applicants are Mrs. and Mr. Cottingham, and the officer's recommendation is for conditional approval, and the application is before committee because more than 10 letters of objection have been received. The application site comprises of 6.92 hectares of land used for equestrian purposes as granted under the original permission. You can see the plan on the screen. So the land is to the south of Shortheath Lane. To the east is Hollybush Lane, and to the southeast is Burfield Common. To the west is Wise's Fir. The original permission granted a stable block and manege that have already been implemented on the site. So this is a first photo looking in the north of the site, so standing near the boundary of Shortheath Lane, looking down towards the implemented manege and stables. This is just an internal yard photo of the implemented stable block. This is the implemented manege. And then this is looking from the approved access that's yet to be implemented towards the stable and manege. The approved site layout also shows that there's an area of hard standing for parking on the northern boundary. This is yet to be formalised, and a new access in the northeast corner is proposed, and the visibility displays have already been agreed under the original permission. So this is just showing the proposed parking area. It's already been approved, so that's looking from the existing access eastwards. Again, this is looking from the existing track to the northern boundary of that's at Shortheath Lane behind those trees. And then this is just showing the approved new access under the 2021 permission. And then this is a photo of the location of the already approved access looking from Shortheath Lane. It's cut. So there's an existing access to the neighbouring land that you can just see in the corner of that photo, and the new access, you can see there's already been some clearance of vegetation, but that's where the new access is proposed. And then this is Short Heath Lane, standing at the existing access looking eastwards towards the new access. So there's a slight clearing that you can see, and that's where the new access is proposed. The application the application seeks to primarily vary condition 16 from private equestrian purposes to allow for assisted livery purposes. The applicants would like to accommodate other people's privately owned horses at their stable in return for a fee. It is proposed that the applicants would provide daily horse care, including turning out and bringing in. The application does not seek to allow for commercial riding, breeding, or training of horses. The number of horses stabled will remain at 16 as approved by the original consent. In addition, the application proposes to vary conditions 4, the Construction Environment Management Plan, and 7, Biodiversity Mitigation Enhancement Plans, so that mitigation and enhancement measures are implemented in accordance with a landscape and ecological management plan submitted with the application. It is proposed to remove condition 5 related to tree protection during construction. It is proposed to vary condition 6 so that landscaping is implemented in accordance with the proposed layout plan as shown on the screen. The plan is only intended to show the landscaping, so the hedge along the western boundary next to the track has already been planted, and it's proposed that a root protection area will be provided to the northern boundary hedge and bank, and the plans show the area that will be marked out with a rail fence at 50 centimetres high. You can see it's marked with those black dots, that's where the fence line is. It is also, So that's a photo just showing the existing track with the new hedge planted, and it's looking northwards towards the existing access. And then it's also proposed that condition 15, the manure storage and disposal, is amended so that the development is carried out in accordance with these details, which is that the manure will be stored in a storage container to be filled and emptied every 1 to 2 months. You can see in that photo the storage container next to the stable building. It's also agreed as part of the application that external lighting installed without the consent from the local planning authority will be removed, and any new external lighting would be installed would need to be agreed first in accordance with the local planning authority. Moving on to the next section, so the planning history in the report explains the history for the site and why officers sought to deal with matters relating to conditions 4, 5, 6, 7, and 15 as part of this application. Turning to the consultation responses and public representations, these have been summarised in part 4 of the report. It's noted that 7 letters of support have been received and 13 letters of objection. Next, turning to the appraisal, it is considered that the proposed variation to condition 16 would in principle be accepted. The assisted livery use would align with policies in the local plan, including strengthening the rural economy and increasing opportunities for people to enjoy the countryside, whilst those variations proposed to conditions 4, 5, 6, 7, and 15 relate to the development management considerations and are not considered to change the principle of development. The main issue with the proposal to vary condition 16, so that's allowing the use of the assisted livery, is whether that assisted livery service would result in a harmful intensification of the use of the site. Objectors have raised concerns that the proposed use would result in harm to the rural character of the area, neighbouring amenity, traffic, and highway safety, whilst those in support argue the use will not significantly impact infrastructure. These have all been noted, but due to the nature of the assisted livery use, where one full-time person managing the horse care with owners not required to visit every day, and that the number of horses are not changing from that originally approved, it is considered that proposal will not be significantly different from that already approved, and therefore would not be detrimental to the character of the area, neighbouring amenity, nor highway safety and traffic. Condition 16, it is recommended, would be amended to only allow for an assisted livery service, but would not allow for any other commercial activity at the site. It is noted that highways impact is a significant concern for objectors due to the rural nature of the lanes. The attention of the committee is brought to the NPPF, which advises that an application should only refused where there is an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts would result in a severe impact on the road network. The highways officer advises that the movements in and out of the site as the result of the proposed assisted delivery service would not be significant, nor raises any highway safety concerns. Conditions have been recommended to minimise impacts of the proposed commercial use. This includes visiting hours to the stables and restriction on storing paraphernalia externally. In terms of highways impact, it is recommended that for the assisted delivery use commences, that the new access and parking area approved under the original consent are implemented. The landscape and ecological management plan submitted to meet the requirements of the construction environment management plan and biodiversity mitigation enhancement conditions were accepted by the ecology officer. It is accepted that external lighting will be removed from the site with a condition proposed to secure this. The external lighting condition is proposed to be reworded so the ecology officer can ensure that any proposed lighting would not result in harm to protected species. Consultees raised no objection to the removal of the tree protection scheme condition, and an informative regarding protection of trees is still retained. The layout plan was agreed by the tree officer, which shows the hedge planted on the western boundary and the rail fence to secure the root protection area for the northern boundary hedge. The details for manure storage and disposal are accepted, and no objections were received by consultees on these details. In the other matter section, just to note that it is not considered that there will be an impact to the detailed emergency planning zone, nor to horse welfare. And it is also noted that concerns are raised in representations regarding the potential breaches and conditions. This permission seeks to resolve these. It's not a material planning consideration that this application is made retrospectively regarding some of the matters. The application was originally due to go to committee in October, where the update sheet did propose amendments to conditions related to the new bank, the restriction of equestrian paraphernalia and visiting hours. These have been updated in the officer's recommendation in this agenda report. In conclusion, it is considered that in the planning balance, the proposed minor variations to the original permission to allow for an assisted delivery service and to address ecological, landscape, tree protection and manure management conditions is acceptable. The application is recommended for conditional approval. Within the officer's report, it is the list of conditions is now updated, and the conclusion shows the proposed changes to the conditions on the original permission. Just to note, in the update report, there has been it is suggested the correction is made to condition 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask Paul Goddard if there are any additional highways comments, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I consider it appropriate just to reiterate a couple of points made by my colleague Gemma Kirk. Firstly, the site is still being implemented. The original consent from 2 years ago is still being constructed in the site, and that includes the provision of the new access. Any site visit that you would have undertaken, they're still using the old access at the moment, and some objectors have raised concerns about that, which I concur with, but there is a new access that will be provided with the previous consent and affirmed with this proposal before you. There are 16 horses on the site, and with the proposal there will still be 16 horses on the site, and they will require the same number of transporters, visits by vets, deliveries, farriers. That will be unchanged by this proposal. The needs of 16 horses will remain the needs for 16 horses. There may be some additional visits by owners because the horses will no longer be owned by the same owner. But as has been mentioned, the horses will generally be looked after on behalf of the owners by the applicant's daughter. That's quite usual, I understand, for such livery uses. And I would take the view, unlikely, that even if all owners decided to visit their horse on one day, 16 vehicle movements in and out during the course of the day would not, in my view, cause severe impact on the highway. But as I would mention, I wouldn't expect owners to attend the site every day. And having someone on site to look after the horses as before will minimise traffic movements anyway. So no objection from officers in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on then to objectors. So the objectors, anybody who supports an application on applicants all have 5 minutes between each group, if you see what I mean. I know I will ask you if you want any kind of warning as to when you need to finish. So please, could we move on then to objectors? And I believe Peter James and John Braithwaite both want to speak to us via Zoom.
Yes, we do. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Hold on, let's start the video.
Ah, there you are. Okay.
That's
Look, my name is John. I think Peter will speak first, and then I'm very willing to spend a little bit of time on that.
Okay, so who's speaking first?
me, Peter James.
Do you want any kind of warning?
Do we have 5 minutes between us, Mr. Chairman?
5 minutes between you, yes.
Okay, can you warn me at 2 minutes then, please?
3 minutes, okay, yes.
2 minutes, please. 2 minutes, please.
I'll speak it. Sorry.
2 minutes left.
Is that a warning when he's been speaking for 3 minutes?
Okay.
There's 2 minutes there. Okay.
Oh no, please, when I've spoken for 2 minutes.
Sorry?
When I've spoken for 2 minutes, please.
3 minutes, yes, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 years ago, we had a similar meeting to look at the original proposal. And there were, again, quite a few local objectors. And most of the objectors said, amongst other things, that the facility, the development, was too large to be just for private family use, as what the proposal said. However, we were assured by the committee members and by the planning officers at that time and by the proposer, Mrs. Cottingham, that it was only for family use. Now we find ourselves 2 years later thinking, well, perhaps it was intended to be for commercial equestrian use all the time anyway. And that's what we're now being asked to consider. And we're really not too happy about this. And we believe that some of the existing conditions are being breached. We believe that damage has been done in the local woods by the riders from this facility. Paths have been churned up. The riders are not keeping to the assigned bridleways in the Inglefield estate, causing huge amounts of mud during the damp days that we've had. There have been reports of riding lessons being conducted along Shortheath Lane. Many horse boxes and camper vans staying overnight. So there is already disruption caused by this. Some of the paths, some of the narrow paths in our local woods, which is our amenity, have become almost impassable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Braithwaite?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So I speak on behalf of the Maria Pagotto, who can't make it today. On the objections, I observed that of all the objections, most of them were local, and of the backers, I don't believe any of them were in Wisers First or Shortheath Lane. And given that 10% of people complain, I think there's a lot more resistance to this, and nobody I've spoken to in Wisers First or Shortheath Lane is keen on this. Getting back to the map and the highway safety, the biggest highway concern is not cars, and the change of the location of the exit is definitely better. But that road is a 60-mile-an-hour road, and when horses are on that road, there is not enough space, particularly if they've just gone round the corner. And the trouble is, the route out of those stables that is being taken considerably every day by horses has to go west. It can't go east because the crossroads is too dangerous. It is about a mile on the road, on several roads, to get to the first bridleway. It is far too far away from bridleways, and the horses are traveling too far. And they also overlap by about 500, 600 meters with the school walk. So there are families in Wisesfurze and Shortheath Lane who walk along Shortheath Lane and then Green Lane to the local school. There is no pavement, so there's no protection for people. And then on Green Lane, as you get past the crossroads, because you should go across that, they don't do that. They go through the local footpaths, as Peter has identified. Green Lane is very narrow. It's hard to even get a car past a horse on that road because it's just above the width of a car. So we don't think the location is appropriate for this volume of horses, certainly going along the roads. It is an inappropriate location for this. We thought it was going to be much more for private use with just a little bit of traffic. But my greatest concern is horse, road safety, in particular pedestrian safety. And we don't think these have been adequately looked at by the council in this application in the first place. So that's my concern. And I'll share that with you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for giving us that time.
Thank you. Thank you. Could we move on to the applicant, Amanda Cottingham? Would you like to come to the rostrum, please?
Question to objectors first. Does anyone have any questions?
I beg your pardon. If you just bear with me for a moment. Sorry. Do members have any questions for the objectors, please? Councillor Poole.
Good evening, and forgive me for speaking to you, but you're actually behind me, so forgive me. So I do a lot of trail running. I live in Burfield Common. I often come down the lane, cross up to Nerford, and around several of the woods there. I have noticed a decrease, let's say, in the ability to use the trails. I'm just wondering how you know that the horses that are using the trails come from that site rather than any of the other paddocks that are around our green area.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, it is a surmise. It is simply since the Oakdown Fields facility got into operation that we've noticed a degradation in these, and we have seen horses and riders from Oakdown Fields on those paths. If they kept to the bridle paths, there wouldn't be an issue, but they don't. Thank you.
And if I could add to that, they have been seen coming down Shortheath Lane, turning left at Island Farm Road and then going right into the woods. But also, when you look at the actual geography, most of the paddocks and the horse stables, etc., are actually sort of down the hill towards the centre of Solhampstead. The only horses that seem to come up and down Shortheath Lane are from that site.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Other than the anecdotal evidence that you've given us this evening, have any steps been taken to report what, to me or to any objective observer, would be a sort of a nuisance? So have you taken steps to approach the council and report that? Have you collected any evidence of your own? Is there any other evidence that you can share with us this evening?
Yes, a complaint has gone into the council. I know about some of these things, which took ages for the officers to respond. And the only response there was about the camper van. I know there have been discussions in local Facebook group for the community on the churning up of paths. And our councillor, Ross McKinnon, I believe, is aware of these discussions.
And also, can I add that the rate of acceleration of growth of the occupancy of that premises has really only accelerated in the since spring. So last year, it was a mainly vacant property. And therefore, we've only really had one spring and summer of where there apparently are 16 horses in there. And this is starting to get worse. And the quality is getting worse. And there are concerns. And of course, then this application has come in. So we took this opportunity, and many others did, to object and raise, you may call it anecdotal evidence, but I think several people raised this. So either that, I think you could argue it's more like witness rather than anecdotal. But if you want, we can take photographs. I would also say that the owners are I wouldn't say the owners engage in the community, and certainly they haven't reached out to anybody local to build any kind of connection with the local community whatsoever. So it's very difficult because they keep themselves to themselves in terms of having an opportunity to actually have a conversation with them.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. So I call again on Amanda Cottingham, the applicant, to come to the rostrum, please. And there's a button on the microphone to press to enable you to speak.
With a picture of the person and the line.
Yes, and you also have five minutes to speak. Would you like a warning? When would you like a warning? Sorry. Minutes ago. Okay, minute left. Okay, thank you. And the timer will start as soon as you start speaking.
Okay, I would like to address all of the objections and discuss some of the inaccuracies in them, but most of the points have already been covered by the planning officer and the consultees. So as time is limited, I'll just talk fast and touch on a few of these. The vast majority of the objections related to highways, but the highways consultee covered that in detail. Just to reiterate, we are not planning to increase the number of horses on site. So saying there'll be more horses, there won't. We already have permission for 16 horses. We commissioned after the objections, because we do engage with the community, and I was concerned about them. We commissioned our own ATC, and it found that there was currently over 800 vehicle movements a day along Shortheath Lane with an average speed of 33 miles an hour. The reason the new access hadn't been constructed is we waited 9 months for highways to give us our access licence. That's why that hasn't been done before this application. One objector noted that there are 10 equestrian centres within 5 miles of the site, multiple private yards and fields containing horses. So arguing that use as a livery yard is out of keeping with the area just isn't accurate. It's a very horsey area, and blaming all horse activity on us is rather unfair. Just to reiterate, we are not looking to increase the number of horses on site. So when I read the report, I was pleased it had been recommended for approval, but I was surprised to see the additional conditions which had not been discussed or raised prior to this. So I asked for clarification of these from our case officer, and I thank you for the amendments made. But I still question whether conditions 16 and 17 fall within the guidelines of the NPPF that states in paragraph 56 that planning conditions should be kept to a minimum, only imposed where they are necessary, relevant to planning and to the development to be permitted, enforceable, precise and reasonable in all other aspects. So given the extreme amount of attention we seem to have received, I'm keen for the conditions to be enforceable and precise. So I'm concerned particularly about the wording of condition 16. I couldn't find any reference in the objections raised over the use of equestrian paraphernalia, and to be honest, I'm not really sure exactly what it means. It's rather open to interpretation. The Cambridge Dictionary defines paraphernalia as all the objects needed for or connected with a particular activity. Does this include everything? It's been designated equestrian land, so it seems very odd to impose a condition that limits the use of items needed for and connected with equestrians. For example, a water trough, that's needed. Are we allowed those? Head collars are left by the gate of the fields for safety when the horses are turned out. Is that allowed? Are we allowed to feed the horses hay in the fields during winter? I'm just trying to find out what this condition seeks to stop us doing. Perhaps it's to protect people's view across the fields, but it's an established planning principle dating back to the 1600s that no one's entitled to view across someone else's land. It also mentions goods and equipment. These are rather all-encompassing and vague terms. The condition starts stating no more storage containers or waste containers. That's clear, it's precise. So I question the need to add the additional wording. Condition 17 is also completely new. The planning officer referred to complaints about noise. Looking after and riding horses is actually quite quiet, and it is a rural activity. In any case, I've read and reread all the objections carefully, can only find one small reference to noise, and this was in the context of if the arena was used for competitions, it will create more traffic movements and noise. But we aren't seeking permission for shows. And even if we were, they would be during the day, so this condition wouldn't address that. Noise complaints are usually dealt with by environmental health, and the environmental health consultee raised no objections.
You have 1 minute remaining.
As you can see from the site map, the nearest houses are 200 metres away, screened by existing hedges and our new hedge once it matures, with 2 additional fields between us. There's currently no restriction on our visiting hours, and none of the other local horse owners or yards have a similar condition, even those which are immediately adjacent to houses. We don't plan to be there regularly, particularly early or late, but sometimes in the summer when the days are long, it's nice to have a ride in the evening. If you're going to a show, it can be necessary to get there early to groom and plait your horse in preparation. So I'm questioning whether this condition currently fulfills the criteria of conditions only being imposed where they're necessary and reasonable. It will limit our ability to do what essentially we've already been given planning permission to do. So I'd appreciate the committee's consideration of the wording of condition 16 and the imposition of condition 17. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you remain, please, in case members have any questions? Do members have any questions, please? Councillor Lewis.
Sorry, it's really just for clarification. The 16 horses, they're there, and you said that there's not going to be.
Can I just say we haven't got 16 horses there at the moment?
Okay.
We've got 8 empty stables just now.
I was just going to ask what happens should one become in foal, or if you get new horses arriving and one is in foal, how do you?
We'd probably cry because we won't have a stallion on site. It's just not safe. And it's not a yard for breeding. So I can't imagine that would happen. If it was, we don't really have the facilities for foaling anyway. So I can't see an occasion where that would happen. He's caught me on the hop now. But if someone arrived full livery with a mare and then found out that it was in foal, we would ask them to go somewhere else because we don't have the facilities for a mare and a foal.
Okay.
It's not planned to be used for breeding. It's just for private people like me, generally middle-aged women who have a horse as a hobby. But most of them work full time, so want somewhere where they can keep their horses. Someone else will look after it most of the time and they'll ride it when they can.
Thank you.
Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Speaker. It was Miss Cottingham, beg your pardon.
That's all right.
I just remembered your name there. Apologies. Curious, are you in the ward? Are you in the village?
Yeah, I live in Burfield Common. I came to see you actually at one of your surgeries.
You know what? I thought you looked familiar for a second. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, we live just near Tesco in Sun Gardens.
Yes, yes, I remember what we spoke about now.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was my question.
Okay.
Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, so just for clarity, you mentioned the potential imposition of the operating hours or visitor hours imposed by condition 17. And you make reference to wanting to have an evening ride, which again, I fully understand. And I guess that's probably more relevant throughout the spring and summer months. But are you actually envisaging having visitors after 8 p.m?
No, not at all.
Because that's what the condition imposes. It's visitors, isn't it?
Yeah, but by visitors, does that mean people who own their horses there? I'm assuming that's what it means. So I'm assuming does it refer to horse owners? Because the thing is, in the summer, sometimes if you've been working all day, it's light. I mean, till 9:30. You might get there at 6:30, get your horse in, put the tack on, go for a ride. You might get back at sort of 7:30, and then there's oh my God, I've got to get out of here by 8 or I'm breaking planning conditions. That's the only thing. Yeah, obviously you're not going to be riding your horse in the pitch black anyway, but there are times of the year where it's light, it's light till 9:30, and it's not that you'd be riding then, but you might get back to the yard and still want to groom your horse. You sponge them down when they're sweaty, that sort of thing. So it would just be quite stressful if we have to be out of the yard by 8 o'clock on the dot. So yeah, I'm assuming visitors refers to horse owners or not. I mean, I don't know what other visitors we'd have.
Perhaps officers can clarify that in a moment. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we then move on to members' questions of officers and clarifications, please? Councillor Reid.
So I wonder if the officers could actually expand a bit on this condition 16. being a farmer's son, I would be a bit concerned if I had that many bits and pieces, because it literally means everything. And you do need kit to feed to, safety, as in, a bridle or a rope or something like that. I was just wondering if we can word that where it's a bit more, I can see, plant and machinery and all that sort of stuff, but just wondering if we can be a little bit tighter on the wording there.
Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, in my view, the reason that this condition contains a number of elements is actually to be very precise and specific. And I am of the view that the requirements for this are very clear in terms of, unless you want us to go to the detail of saying you can't take a biro pen onto the site or provide an exhaustive bullet point list of what you can't do on the site. I think it's pretty self-evident what's meant by, for instance, equestrian paraphernalia to anyone who is running an equestrian business. So I don't accept that there is a challenge. However, that being said, and with the advice that in your officer's view, this condition is sufficiently precise and enforceable to comply with the recommendations of the MPPF. If members wished to provide an exhaustive list for us, then absolutely officers could make that as nth degree particular as you would like it to be. My advice is that that's unnecessary and onerous. Thank you, Chairman.
Just for clarification, they'll still be able to put essential pieces of equipment such as troughs or hay racks or whatever in the field.
Thank you, Chairman. My feeling is that actually those activities would be prohibited, and the reason for that is because it becomes essentially clutter across the site. So if members disagree with the intent of the condition to prevent cluttering of the site with various equestrian paraphernalia, then the alternative there is to strike the condition because it doesn't meet with what's reasonable in terms of the planning permission being given. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Chair. As someone who grew up on a farm, my family still have their farm. It's quite common for animals to be prepped well in advance. So the 7 a.m. start is probably a bit late. If you're working on the land, you're probably looking a bit earlier, and it's not very loud to set the horse. However, I would like to speak to Councillor Reid's comment. The piece that I refer to in the clause in condition 16 is, I'm going to read it out here. So, no materials, goods, plant, machinery, equipment, storage container, waste containers, or other items of equestrian paraphernalia shall be stored, processed, repaired, or displayed in the open land. So if I'm busy with my horse in the field, I should say at this point that I don't have a horse and I haven't ridden for 25 years, that if I was to get off the horse and feed it and leave the sack or leave any of my equipment, my hat, or anything lying around, technically that's being displayed in the open. If there's an issue with any of my equipment and I'm fiddling with it and I'm repairing it, that's also in the open space. I think that is incredibly restrictive if that is a condition that is to be included within this application.
Can I come back? Thank you, Chairman. The intention of the condition, and I take on board what you say about it being restrictive, isn't to prevent activities that are incidental to what you're carrying out on the site at the time. There has to be a test of expediency with a planning condition as well and its enforcement. So if you were to be, for instance, using a crop mower to mow over the grass there, and it broke down and you needed to go back to a shed, get your tools, have a tinker around with a spanner, get it back running again and go off on your merry way, then in that time, if somebody had reported a breach of planning control, by the time the planning enforcement officer showed up in order to investigate that alleged breach of planning control, there would be no breach of planning control. And even if they had turned up and found it in process, then there wouldn't be expediency to taking action regarding it. So in terms of what is reasonable for the condition, this is to prevent the permanent storage of items on the land. This is not to prevent a very temporary nature of storage on the land, and I don't think it implies a temporary nature of storage on the land. As I say, it's in the event that the land becomes cluttered with paraphernalia that should be stored within the apron curtilage of the buildings.
Any other questions? Councillor Pemberton. I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, you've had your opportunity to speak. Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, just if I may, Chair, state clarity on the meaning of the word visitors as per condition 17. I think I know what it means, but I mean, does that mean that the yard can be used outside of those hours, provided the people using it are not visitors? Thank you.
The recommendation for the wording visitors relates to any person who isn't an owner, applicant, occupant of that site. So a person who is paying for the services of that business on the site would be a visitor.
Thank you. Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Chair. We seem to be on a bit of a roll here tonight between Councillor Pemberton, Councillor Reid and myself. So, Mr Till, just for my understanding, this application it's to change the land, and there's also a dwelling that will be used by Miss Coddingham's daughter in order to be able to better care for the animals. Would that then mean then, under the term visitors, that she's not allowed to have friends come and visit her, because that would be coming to her home, which is on land that would then, visitors would have to leave after 8 o'clock at night? I'm just want to be very, very clear that I understand the wording.
I can clarify that one. There isn't a dwelling on the land. It's stables, manege, land for equestrian use, but there isn't a dwelling on there. It's just a stable block yard with a manege.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Kirk. When I read the papers, I could have sworn I saw reference to that being an area where someone could reside on site to care for the animals. Beg your pardon.
Yeah. Councillor Kanda.
I guess a couple of questions. First of all, as a lady what didn't have the chance to ask the question, is she able to have a water trough on the land?
Members, if you consider it reasonable to insert a clause that excludes water troughs from the requirements of that condition, then I think officers could support that change.
I think that would help, yeah. It's quite clear that whilst the wording may be, in your opinion, very clear, for the people who may be affected by it, there are some ambiguities with regards to visitors and other questions like that. It comes to mind that in terms of the restriction on 16, I understand the objective is to not have long-term things sitting there, rusting, being abandoned, etc. So if you want to make it measurable, can it be something that is time-bound? Something no longer there than 24, 48 hours or what have you, unless it's broken down and in need of repair. Because, for instance, I think in terms of picking up manure, there are automatic machines that suck up they go along. That might sit overnight because they've only done half a field, because they may have rented it for 2 days. And if somebody takes a picture on that day and it makes a complaint, and you come back the next day because you happen to have the staff, which I know you don't, but and you still see it there, then it's like, oh, okay, it's been there for ages as far as you're concerned. So I'm just trying to avoid unnecessary work and complaints, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I come back to my point about expediency. So if an enforcement officer was to visit a site being asked to take action against a piece of paraphernalia that was ostensibly stored on the land, then they would need to examine that it was in fact stored for the long term on the land. If they came along, found it one day, then they'd say, get this gone. And if they were assured it would be gone in 2 days, they wouldn't worry about it. If it was there a week and a half later, when they'd been assured it was gone in 2 days, they'd ask questions about why. But it would be quite a process down the road before any enforcement action was taken against something being stored on the land in breach, and with the opportunity for discussion on the necessity of it being stored on the land with the person doing the storing, and the detail in relation to that. How long would be the key question there?
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Taylor.
You know, having listened to these discussions around item 16, I just wonder whether the removal of the words or other items of equestrian paraphernalia, perhaps that could be removed from that restriction. Because I think the word paraphernalia can mean an awful lot of, as the lady I think said, an awful lot of things. Just a suggestion.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Can we then move on to debate then? And does anybody wish to open the debate, please? Councillor Reid.
I'm just wondering, so we heard from the objectors saying that local footpaths had been brought into a poor condition. I think from me specifically, and being relatively new to this committee, I think that isn't that more of a case of putting specific controls on footpaths, things like kissing gates, to dissuade horses from on horse riders going down there, rather than it being an objection for it becoming commercial use. I know, coming from the rural ward of Bucklebury as board member there, we have a shortage of commercial equestrian sites. And so this would, if it was my ward, I think it would be welcomed generally by the residents.
Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. As an avid walker, hiker, the paths across most of Burfield, Mortimer, and some of the parishes within Bradfield, which is Salem Hampstead for this one, and leading into Upton Nerford, which is the adjacent ward, there's more than just walkers who use the path. You get BMXers, you get bikers, dirt bikes. I've only ever once seen a horse, and that was on a bridleway. You do get a lot of area that's privately owned, so it's the Englefield Estates. You've got Upton Nerford Estates, and a lot of those are being privately managed. It's very difficult to enforce kissing gates. I've previously spoken to some of the landowners there, and it's because they themselves require, if you're moving something in or you're trying to do any sort of clearance, letter picking and such, sometimes you need the ability to pull bags rather than hoist over a gate. So I don't necessarily, whilst I believe that there are horses who do use paths, I don't necessarily think that it's purely, or the path degradation is purely the responsibility of the horses in the area in this case.
Anybody else wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Reid.
Sorry, just going back onto the footpaths. I'm just wondering if that we could actually have a condition that says that there should be strong guidance from the owner of the commercial equestrian site here, that basically says, you know, if you're going to be a good customer, we expect you not to go in footpaths.
Thank you, Chairman. To advise on that, and we actually have an ex-Public Rights Way officer in the meeting, so I'm sure he'll set me straight if I err. But footpaths is separate legislation to planning, and actually, I believe that a person is committing an offence if they use a non-bridle way for riding a horse. So in that respect, actually this would be transcending the remit of planning quite considerably, but by all means the owner should be advising anybody who's riding, who they know to be riding on the wrong sort of path, that they're actually committing an offence.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. I suppose as a corollary, would we be thinking of this kind of issue if it was a garage and telling car drivers where they should drive and not drive and so on. Councillor Poole.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kanda. Looking at some of the clauses that we spoke about today, some of the conditions, I'd really want to go back and just kind of flush a few things out with some of the members. I think for avoidance of all doubt, for clause 17, for condition 17, I think should this be reviewed by us tonight to be voted upon, I would like a definition in there about what visitor is so that it's very, very clear and that then becomes enforceable. And then with regards to number 16, I would support Councillor Taylor in adjusting the wording there to make it very evident what they can and cannot store on site in order to maintain the animals in good condition, such as the availability of water troughs and anything that may be needed for, say, daytime feeding when someone is not available there to look after them. I wonder if anyone else has any suggestions on any proposed amendments to wording on any of the other recommendations that we've spoken about this evening.
Are you making a proposal?
I am wishing to outline that at the moment. I know that we are progressing very quickly in the conversation and I didn't want it to be missed when we came to make that decision, Chair.
Sorry. Councillor Kanda, did you indicate?
No.
Sorry. I missed somebody. Councillor Pemberton, sorry.
I'll hold for now, based on what Councillor Poole's just said.
Councillor Reid.
I kind of disagree on the paraphernalia bit. I think if we can be really specific, if we can say you can have water troughs, thinking about areas of occasionally horses don't get on with each other and you have to take them apart because they all tend to bite or kick each other if they fall out. You would need to put within that taped area some water until it needs to be brought in. But I can't think of anything else on long-term paraphernalia where you shouldn't tidy it away that night. I mean, surely you'd want to tidy it away anyway because it doesn't get stolen.
Oh, well, could I have a proposal, please? Councillor Reid.
I propose that we allow that water troughs can be kept out. On condition 16.
I had in mind a proposal for whether we accept the officer's recommendation to refuse the application or
sorry,
accept the,
just
accept the
as a change on
recommendation
the
with
condition.
changes.
Sorry, as a change on the condition, because at the moment, if we accepted it, we wouldn't be able to allow to put water troughs out. I'm wondering if we can agree that what that condition 16 is.
Well, I mean, I assume if we minded to, we could approve the application with asking the officers to review conditions 16 and 17, and perhaps get with the permission of the chairman or whatever. Or would that be sensible?
Chairman, if I can advise, I would suggest from what Councillor Poole said and what Councillor Reid has said, that the insertion of an exemption within condition 16, stating that these requirements do not relate to water troughs to be kept on the land, would satisfy the concerns in relation to that particular condition, as it sounds to me like the water troughs are the sticking point as far as that's concerned. In respect to the visitor hours mentioned by Councillor Poole, the visitor hours condition actually has some definition in there, which is except for employees and in emergencies. That could be tightened to a visitor is a person, not the owner or an employee of the business on the site. For example, wording to that effect, because that's really what the condition's getting at, is for people who aren't owner or employee not to be on site.
I would find that agreeable, Mr. Till.
Thank you. So, Chairman, that's what I would suggest is going into what I'm hearing coming forward as potentially a proposal right now.
Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, and just before we do go to a proposal, Chair, it's probably sensible just to address Councillor Taylor's point around the wording of equestrian paraphernalia? Are we going to keep that in or are we going to take it out? I've got no firm opinion on it. And as a non-equestrian person, you know, I wouldn't necessarily know what equestrian paraphernalia is without having someone explain it to me, but I'm happy to go with the majority.
I think we need a proposal, and in which case somebody, if that doesn't meet everybody's concerns, then an amendment can be proposed. So would Councillor Reid?
I'm just wondering, proposal to accept the officers with the minor changes to the conditions of 16, with the addition of water troughs being allowed, and 17 with the definition of what a visitor is.
Does that find a seconder? I think Councillor Poole was first. So
Second by me, Chair.
So the proposal's officer's recommendation with changes to condition 16 to allow water troughs, and to changes to condition 17 to define visitors, and also we also have the CEMP condition on the update sheet. So could everybody in favour of that proposal please show by the showing their hands, please? I think that's unanimous. So that that application is passed with those changes to the conditions. Thank you. Could we then move on to the second planning application this evening, which is the 24/01667 TPW, land east of Princess Hill and Tilehurst. And I won't say Reading, which is says here. Thank you. Could I ask Senior Tree Officer John Thomas to introduce the application, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just get my screen up. Thank you. So this application is at land east of Pinson's Lane, Tilehurst. And the reference number is 24/01667/TPW. It is a tree works application. So this is a tree works application which is submitted because there are potentially works which might affect trees under Tree Preservation Order 195. I'm just trying to move my screen. Sorry. So the proposal is the installation of fencing around field margins and public rights of way routes within the RPA's route protection areas of TPO trees, Tree Preservation Order trees. The methodology and design for the upgrade of the footpath along the central tree line and hedgerow section of the public right of way, and again within the route protection areas of retained trees. And then finally, the design, methodology and construction of proposed drainage improvements of existing ditches, again within the route protection areas of retained trees. The applicant is Landsec INU. The agent is Town. The reason for the presentation before the committee is there has been a member call-in, but equally there have been over 10 objections. And the officer recommendation is an approval with conditions. The site is a green area east of Pinson's Lane in Tilehurst. So this is a site plan. The M4 can be seen, if you can see my cursor, the M4 is in the southeast corner of the air photo. This is junction 12 with the A4 Bath Road. We have Sainsbury's, IKEA, and Pinsent's, sorry, my Pinsent's Lane snakes around past those two sites and continues up towards City Road, which is this road here, the East-West Road, and Little Heath Road. Pinsent's Lane itself is stopped up, it's blocked, so there's no through traffic, and this site is to its east. There are a number of ancient woodlands in the location and thereabouts. So Oliver's Copse, Withy Copse, can't remember the name of these other copses, I'm afraid they escape me, but these are also ancient woodlands. There is a public footpath which runs east-west through the site, which is Tilehurst Public Footpath 13. There's another public footpath which is to the east of the site near Starling's Drive, sorry. There is a used desire line north and south, and that begins at the parish office down here in the south. So, as I say, this is the site. Those are its principal constraints. It was once used as a golf course. That's since lapsed. Now the area is grass and scrub with old tree lines and areas of young woodland developing. This proposal seeks the permission to carry out specific works within the root protection areas of trees under Tree Preservation Order 195. So this is Tree Preservation Order 195. This is the plan from that TPO. And I have highlighted for the committee the areas of trees which might be affected, potentially affected by this application. And they are A2, which is this, is indicated as a hedgerow. It contains oak, field, maple, and hazel. And this is here on the plan. And then some of the oak trees, which have been marked up here with pink circles. And although it's not shown on this plan, the public footpath runs just south of that hedge line in an east-west direction and continues. So the application relates to fencing, surface works, and drainage. The surface works and the drainage are in relation to the use of public footpath Tilehurst 13, whereas the fencing is a different matter. But all of these elements may impact the root protection areas of those protected trees. Hence the application has been submitted. Members may be aware that there is a tree protection plan in the submissions, and I've reproduced that here. This is in accordance with the British Standard BS 5837 2012, which is trees in relation to design, demolition and construction recommendations. BS 5837 gives a methodology for calculating the reprotection areas of trees on the basis of their stem or stems diameter, if they're multi-stemmed. And you can see that that has been carried out here, that exercise has been carried out here. I'll get a zoomed in section in a minute. The root protection areas are shown as circles of various sizes around the dot, which represents the location of the stem of the tree. So that's tree protection 1 of 2, and this is page 2 of 2. Let me just go back. Again, the footpath is marked in the cyan colour, and continues through site and intersects these root protection areas. And the proposed fencing is shown in orange for members, and you can see there's a slight intersection here of the fencing, but the path is the major element which intersects the root protection areas of these trees. So this is the zoomed in section. This is area A2 that I was talking about. And this is not the definitive line of the path, this is indicative, but I hope members can see that there it would be any engineering works to this path would intersect these root protection areas illustrated. So just bear with me. So the pink circles are on this plan designate the root protection areas, and the green circles represent the actual canopy extent of each tree as measured by the arboriculturist at the time. And again, the same technical information applies. These pink circles are the root protection areas of those trees. And along here, these are oak trees. And on the previous slide, they are principally field maple and hazel, but also an individual oak. So this is a site photo of TPO Area 2 looking northeast. I've said up Tilehurst, footpath 13, I hope that's clear. The desire line is along here. I'm not sure if that's the definitive line. That would be a question for public rights of way. There's surface vegetation, and members can see these are the hazel and field maple and large oak in area A2. The oak is in the background. And then this oak further on is one of the individuals that appears on the second part of the tree protection plan. And this is the reverse view. Having continued along the path, this is the oak within area A2, and this is looking back down the path. And we have hazel and field maple trees. Continuing northeast up the footpath, then this is tree T20, which is the first tree that we, standard tree that we, individual standard tree that we intersect, that we come across in that section. And again, that the root protection area of that tree intersects the footpath, which is roughly in this area. So it would pass beneath the canopy and obviously over the roots of that tree. So that's tree T20, a nice mature oak. This is T223, which is slightly further northeast, in the middle of the group of 6 individual trees. And it's a tree which shows veteran characteristics. So it has a spot of decay in the base there, some epicormic growth. The crown is beginning to retranche. It's beginning to get smaller. We're beginning to get more epicormic flushing along the primary branches. A secondary crown is developing. The tree is over mature, entering old age, showing veteran characteristics. So it's a notable tree. Again, continuing up the path, again in a northeasterly direction, and turning around and viewing back down the path. These are trees T24, T25. Tyler's footpath 13 is in this area, approximately the definitive line. So that's a context shot again, which I hope members find helpful. So I've discussed I've given an idea of the proposed fencing line. Then there is ditch work proposed, which also might impact the trees, because obviously it might involve excavation. So we've looked at the trees in area A2, and we've looked at these 6 individual oak trees. There's also a hedgerow to the north of, or to the north of the footpath. And that's quite a significant landform. It's quite a significant land feature. That sits on an old boundary bank, and these standard trees that I've been discussing, they also sit on an old boundary bank. And to the north is a land ditch, which has been functioning as a drainage ditch, but obviously they silt up over time with detritus and so on. And so it's not really a particularly functioning drainage ditch. And at the site visit, we did see that there was some waterlogging of the definitive line of footpath 13. So the application, the application isn't necessarily permission to carry out works to the footpath, which is covered by separate legislation, but it's considering the impact of those works on the root protection areas of the protected trees. So if there are drainage works carried out, then that has the potential to damage the roots of these protected trees. This is from the Civic Engineers Ditch Improvement Plan works, which is part of one of the appendices that accompanies the application. And you can see that there are various work areas described, some of which include some clearance of undergrowth. So you could see in the slides that there was a lot of nettles and brambles on the definitive line, which are obstructing use of the definitive line of footpath 13. So there is a proposal to clear some of that. None of that is protected by virtue of TPO 195. There is some discussion about removal of small self-set trees and so on, and the public have commented on that element. But the proposal for the drainage work is clearing undergrowth, reinstating the ditch, which, as I say, runs to the north of the hedge. And that is suggested in the ARB method statement, which is submitted within the application. That is suggested that it would involve the use of an air spade, which is a specialist piece of equipment which uses compressed air to blast detritus out of the ditch and clean the ditch in that manner. And the advantage of that is it wouldn't impact tree roots, so that is in accordance with BS 5837 and is also in accordance with National Joint Utilities Group advice in Chapter 4 of their advice to the utilities in the UK. They are suggesting reinstating the bank in certain places and reinstating the ditch to a metre. So there is potential there to impact the root protection areas and certainly some of the roots of the trees and potentially even some of the structural roots of some of the trees, depending on the root architecture of the individual trees concerned. So our method statement, which has been submitted, does go into details about supervision by an on-site arboriculturalist for certain operations. And certainly that's something that officers support. There is a section of the ditch which is piped, and that's roughly in this area, work area 4. And the application includes details about increasing the size of that pipe. The pipe that's on site at the present is about 100, 150 mil. And the suggestion is to use a pipe a twin wall pipe of 450 mil. So that would greatly improve drainage flow. And again, that would be an operation, if it was intersecting the root protection areas of protected trees, that would be an operation that should be supervised by an arboriculturist to ensure that no roots were harmed, or any harm was to the minimum. Oh, apologies. So the recommendation is to approve the tree works application with certain conditions, and the applicant has indicated that they would like a slight alteration to the trigger point of condition 3, that the trigger point should be prior to any works to improve the public footpath, as opposed to my original recommendation, which was which gave the wording of development, I believe. I hope that is helpful, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any highways comments, please, Mr. Goddard?
Thank you, Chairman. The only public highway that is near to the works is Pinsent's Lane, which, as has been mentioned, travels north to south to the west of the proposal before you. These works that have been described in detail do not affect the public highway, and therefore we have no objection.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on then to Parish Council. Councillor Taylor, are you speaking on behalf of the Parish Council as a local member, or both?
You can hear me now. Yes, I'll be honest, I didn't realise I was expecting to speak once,
Okay,
and really cover both my position as the ward councillor and the parish council. I've been advised since when I first arrived here that I should, and I've agreed to speak twice. So initially I can speak as a representative of Tilehurst Parish Council. Perhaps I could just say, for the benefit of, well, those here I think know who I am, anyone watching online, I am one of the ward councillors for Tilehurst Birch Copse, and I am the chairman of Tilehurst Parish Council.
you have 5 minutes. Would you like a warning?
Well, yes, I think in this part of it I probably won't, but if I do ramble on, as it were, give me a warning at 1 minute, because I don't think I will at this stage be using. So I've got a prepared script that I will use later when I come and speak again. But at this point, Tilehurst Parish Council, now just to give a little bit of background, Tilehurst Parish Council was first advised of Town's, you and I's intention to fence this land. I think it was almost 2 years ago, and I can remember having a meeting. This is before I became a ward councillor. And there was, I'll be honest, I did express some concerns at the intentions to fence off this land. And I'll expand a little more on that later. Very little detail was given at that time on the land clearance that was also intended. And what happened was, I think it was probably about 18 months ago, there was a considerable land clearance that took place in preparation for the fencing. And we were told the fencing would go in shortly afterwards. And as has, I think, already been said, that there was actually no need for planning permission for that. The fencing was never put in. Then about, I think it was probably about 9 months ago or thereabouts, there was a second period of land clearance. Now, on both occasions, there was very considerable public concern expressed. I was contacted by numerous people in my capacity as a parish councillor in particular. The parish office was contacted, and there was extreme concern over this. I mean, people were using words like, devastation of the land and so on. Again, we were told I had further discussions with town, and they said that the fencing would go in shortly afterwards. It never happened. And I'll be honest, I'm still wondering whether this fencing will go in. And indeed, there were suggestions at the site visit that the fencing might not actually be installed. However, Carlisle Parish Council did consider this at its at a normal parish council meeting a couple of months back, and it did agree to object to this application. And the reasons for that are documented in the papers that you have in front of you. But just to briefly summarise, and I think it's fair to say most of these concerns are to do with the fencing. But there was particular concerns, and I will probably expand a little on this later, around the impact of fencing off the public rights of way and indeed all the unofficial paths across this land. And there were concerns expressed by certainly people that contacted me over public safety. At the moment, you can walk onto this land, and effectively you can walk you can walk all over it. I mean, some of it is quite overgrown; it would be difficult. But once this fencing was put in, if it goes in, it will be a narrowish path, and footpath 13 is a very long path going all the way from Starlings Drive in the Birds Estate to Hinson's Lane. And I'll be honest, I wouldn't be particularly happy about walking down there, and I use this path very regularly. I live very close to it. If it was narrowly fenced in. There's no lighting on this path at all. If you're walking along there at night time, I mean, I have walked along it at night time with a torch. It would certainly be scary if it is fenced in. And that was certainly a point that a lot of people made. I mean, they're talking about people were saying, look, there's no, if I see someone coming towards me that I'm, just a little wary of, I've got no means of escape. I've got to walk right past them. I mean, at the moment, you could take a detour onto another path or walk in another area. I think this is fair. I'm not suggesting that there is a real problem here, but I mean, it does create fear in people if the path that you've regularly used, it's suddenly got fencing either side of it, and rather restricting, how you can get off of that path if you found that you needed to. There would also be problems because of the flooding that often occurs due to bad weather, and reference was made to that.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Okay. At the moment, you can easily divert off of the path just by walking around the flooded area. And so it is important that the flooding is addressed. There's also a lot of concern over the impact on wildlife, and particularly badger sets, and I will mention that later. And there is concern about the damage to TPO trees. I mean, its reference was made to that earlier. There was some damage to trees that had TPO orders on during earlier clearance work. And we had concerns over the suitability and size of the fencing that would be used. So I think I'll leave it at that for the moment as far as the parish council comments are concerned.
Thank you. Would you like to remain there?
Oh, yes.
Questions? Do any members have questions for the parish council representative, please? Apparently not, so please, thank you. Could I call objectors Donna MacDonald and John Laurie, please? So I hope we've got your name correct.
My name is LaDonna MacDonald.
Sorry. Would you both like to join the stand at the rostrum, please? And are you both proposing to speak?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you like to divide the time between you? You have 5 minutes between you?
Yes, separate. We've sorted it between us. I'll probably take about 3 minutes. If you could give me a notice at 2.
At 2 minutes?
Yes, please.
Okay, fine.
I and other local residents of Calcutt and Tilehurst object to this planning application for the following reasons. Number 1, detriment to existing wildlife. Mandatory biodiversity net gain legislation requires the approval of a biodiversity gain plan. No such plan was included in the documents. Disruption to existing habitat, displacement of deer, badgers, restriction to foraging territory, other medium and small mammals. No indication of how works in the piped section of the ditch or erection of fence posts will get through existing set without damaging the set or disturbing the badgers. I would have expected a report from a badger consultant. Pinsett's Hill provides a wildlife corridor between two sets of ancient woodlands, and fencing would severely restrict this corridor. Number 2, damage to trees. The application refers to work, quote, within the RPAs of retained trees, unquote. Any work should be avoiding RPAs to avoid tree damage. No mention of how protected trees in Pinsett's Lane will be protected from damage by the large lorries and heavy equipment being brought to the site, as Pinsett's Lane is the only access to this site. Some of this tree work appears to have already been done in the documents, and it makes it difficult to determine precisely what tree work is proposed in this application. Fencing, stock fencing. The planned fencing will restrict the access of wildlife and people across the site. Biodiversity of the site will be depleted. Stock fencing is designed to keep wildlife out as advertised by the manufacturers. Either size opening, 15 centimeters or 30 centimeters opening, will only trap wildlife trying to get through, and there they will die. The safety of users of the public rights of way would be compromised by the fencing, leaving no easy means of escape if a member of the public felt unsafe, either with another person or a dog. Dog walkers, ramblers, runners will be funneled onto one path and increasing the likelihood of injury or conflict with animals.
You've been speaking for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Public accessibility. The fencing will reduce the level of access and number of paths available. Other than the designated public rights of way, the paths across the area have been in use by the public in excess of 20 years, as you can see in historical Google Earth images. No indication of the width to be allowed for public rights of way. Grazing livestock. Grazing will change the nature of the biodiversity of the grassland. Livestock will bring animals into highly trafficked areas with many dogs. If grazing with cattle, they will then be in direct contact with the many badger sets, and the risk of the badgers being blamed for bovine TB becomes very real. Livestock will need to be checked twice a day for welfare purposes, and they will need water. How is this to be achieved? Livestock will need to be rotated from area to area to avoid souring of the grazing. How is this to be achieved? Drainage. It is unclear why improvement of the drainage is needed. The moment the hill absorbs a great deal of runoff and stops it running down into Calcott, where is this going to end up?
You've been speaking for 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. The objectors believe this is a precursor to future development and an attempt to unwild the land, making future applications for housing easier to obtain. It is clear the arboricultural statement further development is anticipated even after 3 past refusals, and it is for these reasons the objectors recommend that the application as it stands be refused. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and committee. I believe the document is wrong. There are 4 public footpaths on that hill, 13, 14, 15, and the proposed one for 20. However, the site is adjacent to the North Wessex Downs ANOB and is seen as being open countryside and is not been farmland or agricultural use nor recreational use for over 20 years. And as such, I believe it falls under the 10-year rule and loses the right to be either. The criteria have been established that the hedges to Pinsett's Lane are protected, one of which is subject of this planning application and as such has harsher rules to protect it and the new rules that came in effect from mid-May this year. These include 2-metre protection zones from the middle of hedges on both sides to include badger sets, ground nesting birds and other wildlife under. The height of the embankment should not be reduced. None of these sets or tunnels should be damaged by either heavy machinery or works to plant growth or by poles for fencing. Binfield Badgers and the police both say that there are 20 to 30 badger sets on the hill and the tunnels can extend to upwards of 100 metres or more. The width of the proposed footpaths would not allow safe space distance between people using them, although they would appear to be using the accepted measurements. People could feel threatened. In the plans attached to the end of the statement, it states that ground clearance work will be carried out for the 2nd time this year, as the site was totally decimated to a mud patch just in time for the inspector's site visit.
Could you draw your comments to a conclusion, please?
Yes, surely. I was under the impression the reason for installation of fencing was for the keeping of sheep on the hill. Surely they will need fencing, so why remove the vegetation? Even if this site is penciled in for development, this is not due for another 4 years. If any more work is really required, other than repairing the public rights of way, most of these works would appear to be against many of West Park's green policies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Could you both remain at the rostrum, please, for any members' questions? Do any members have a question, please? Councillor Kanda.
Just quickly, in terms of the reasons for the fencing, who and how has that been informed to you? Because I haven't seen that in the documentation at all.
No, this was basically due to, sorry. This was basically due to Town U and I. When they had the clearance works, we asked why they were having the original clearance works, nothing to do with this, because a lot of the tree work was done then. So we asked why they were actually doing it, and they were saying that they wanted to put sheep on the hill. So to keep the sheep in, they wanted to put fencing on the land, but every time sheep have been mentioned, nothing happens. Every time fencing is mentioned, nothing happens.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I call Councillor Taylor back to the rostrum then, please, for us? Speak to us as local member. And you again have 5 minutes, but you don't have to take it if you don't need it.
Yeah, I said I wouldn't last time, but anyway, see how I go. Okay, now speaking in my capacity as ward councillor for Tylehurst Birch Copse ward. I knock on many doors in this area, and for the past 15 years, the protection of Pinson's Hill would be the #1 issue that is raised with me, and it shows no signs of going away. I live less than 5 minutes walk away from Pinson's Hill and have walked this beautiful piece of land hundreds of times. Beautiful because of its wild nature, the tranquility it provides, and the wildlife, plants and trees that are in abundance. The application, if approved, will lead to fencing of much of this land, apart from the public rights of way and a claimed public right of way. The long east to west path, till 13, is a regularly used path to access IKEA, the Calcutta Retail Park, Phil Village and Station, as well as providing access into the North Wessex National Landscape. The land this path crosses is an important link and wildlife corridor between the ancient woodlands of Withy and Oliver's Copse and the eastern border of the national landscape. Hill 13 is completely unlit, and walkers and local residents have expressed concerns about personal safety should it be enclosed by fencing. I would have second thoughts about using this path late at night after fencing installation. Currently, there are many escape routes should the need arise, and alternative but unrecognised paths, but these will no longer be accessible once fencing is erected. The north-south claimed public right of way. Sorry, that can stay there. I don't need that. Is a shorter path, but used by many school children as a shortcut between Littleheath School and the Calcutta and Holybrook estates. Again, this path will be enclosed on both sides. I would urge the committee and the applicant to consider whether this fencing is really necessary, given other considerations in play at the present time. I refer, of course, to the applicant's intention to develop the western part of this land. The application also involves ditch clearance work, and I have some appreciation with the need for this work of parts of the long till 13 does become flooded, as we saw last week at the site visit. The ditch work, as the accompanying reports point out, presents risks of damage to tree preservational ordered trees and root protection areas. Furthermore, there are badgers, a protected species in this area where some of this work will be carried out. The two previous vegetation clearances in this area over the past 2 years caused considerable public concern due to the extent of the clearance, which involved felling of less mature trees and also exposure of badger sets, to the extent that Thames Valley Police and a local badger protection group, Binfield Badgers, became involved, and I was contacted by both with requests for information. One of my main reasons for calling this application in was to ensure that the further work proposed is fully scrutinised and properly considered by councillors, and to give the wider public the opportunity to express their views. Everyone that has contacted me, and that includes Tyler's Parish Council input, is opposed to the erection of the fencing. And whilst I accept that the applicant may have rights to do this, this planning committee should at the very least urge the applicant, by condition if possible, to restrict the fencing to the bare minimum and to ensure the widest possible footpaths, including access to alternative parks, so that walkers can feel safe when walking on this land, both in daytime and nighttime. And we also ensure by condition that any fencing will provide for
You have 1 minute remaining.
the easy movement of all animal species, be they deer, foxes, rabbits, or other species. I would go further and say that I believe the fencing is unnecessary, given the applicant has other intentions for this land other than grazing livestock. In relation to the ditch work, I am no expert, but flooding of this land has appeared to have worsened this year, and even more so since the land clearances. I would suggest I accept that the ditch clearance may improve flooding along Hill 13, and would urge the committee to consider further conditions such as barriers to protect against tree damage and suitable ground covering to protect soil during any works. I'm aware that the applicant may have tried to avoid work during bird nesting and badger breeding seasons, but I recommend this should be further ensured through conditions. I've also noticed on previous land clearances involved heavy vehicles damaging the land surface with deep tyre tracks. So could we ensure that any vehicle access is strictly controlled? So in summary, my message from residents of my ward and Tyler's Parish is to abandon the fencing, at least for now. Let's ensure no further and unnecessary land clearance, and let's try to eliminate the flooding, but without further damage or risk to the trees, roots, plants and wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you remain there? See if any members have any questions for the ward member. Apparently not. Thank you very much. Could we move on then? Do any members have any questions or wishes for clarifications from officers, please? Councillor Reid.
I'd just like to ask the officers to help refresh my mind in the fact that it's my understanding that at the kind of base level, I suppose, is all land is agricultural unless it's had planning condition to be something else.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, that's correct. The default state of land, or the state that land reverts to when planning permission is considered to be an abandoned use, is agricultural land.
Councillor Kanda.
So I've got a couple of questions, and some of this might be showing my ignorance. If this is abandoned land and therefore it could be used for horticultural purposes, does that mean they don't need any permission to put livestock on the land?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you could graze livestock on any piece of agricultural land as long as there's no, in planning terms, as long as there's no extant planning permission with any restriction on grazing livestock on the land. So in the case of an abandoned use, absolutely you could graze livestock without planning permission.
And do we need to get the owners of the land to specify what they're doing with the land once fenced?
Thank you, Chairman. No, the owners of the land can do whatever they like as long as it's an agricultural use of the land and it doesn't involve development of the land.
And am I right in saying that the only reason we're here for planning is because of the effect on the trees and the public footpaths rather than the fact they're putting fencing up? Because they don't need permission for fencing, right, on their own land?
Thank you, Chairman. Keeping me busy tonight, Councillor Kander. Yes, that's correct. It's the impact on the trees that is of principal concern, the public rights of way of secondary concern, but I would remind members that there is a separate regime governing public rights of way and their obstruction.
So then last question, does that mean then that there's no requirement for the exploration of the impact on the badger sets, et cetera, because this is purely and simply about the effect on the trees rather than fencing itself?
Thank you, Chairman. That isn't quite correct. The local planning authority has a duty of care in terms of biodiversity and ecology and protected species. However, in respect to this application, the way that that kicks in is there is a duty of care as well on the applicant to ensure that any protected species are properly administered to under the relevant habitats regulations. The application should make sufficient consideration of any impact on protected species. So in those terms, yes, we do have a duty of care to ensure that there is no undue impact on protected species. I understand that the ecologist was consulted on this application, and tree officer should be able to fill you in some more.
Thank you. Yes, we did run this past the ecologist. He had no concerns. There's an appendix which includes an ecological assessment. There will be an ecological clerk of works present because obviously badgers are protected species. They're covered by other legislation which has serious penalties. I hope that's of use.
So does that mean that everything's been done it should have been done, or does it mean that there is a rule that basically says you don't have to do it? I wasn't quite clear on your answer, sorry.
I'll take that one. From our perspective, it means everything's done that should have been done. There is overarching legislation that places further duties on the applicant should they find any endangered species habitats while they're in the process of works. They would need to cease work, seek appropriate guidance, etc. And that's a legal duty on them.
Thank you. That's me done.
Okay. Anyone else? I've got a couple of questions. One of the objectors mentioned new rules for hedgerows. Is that something we should be concerned about?
Shall I answer that, Chair?
Sure.
Sure. Thank you. There were two pieces of law which were cited. One is the Hedgerow Regulations 1997, and the other was the Management of Hedgerow Regulations 2024. So both are separate pieces of legislation. They don't apply to a tree works application because they're separate pieces of law. Under the Hedgerow Regulations 1997, the hedgerow is automatically protected. And there's no suggestion in the application to remove the hedge. And the applicant would need to submit a separate notification to us as the local planning authority if they wanted to do something like that. In terms of the management of hedgerow regulations, which requires a 2-metre buffer strip of green vegetation, looking at the definitive map for public rights of way, Tylehurst Public Footpath 13 is within that area. So the highway would, in my view, would take precedence over this 2-metre strip. And then to the north, we have the drainage ditch, which is a historic feature. And looking at the age of the hedge on top of the bank, which is associated with the ditch, which is a very complicated way of saying things, I think that's probably been there about 500 years. So that's a very historic feature. So again, you don't want green vegetation in that because it will silt it up and the drain won't work. I hope that's useful.
Thank you. And the other question, I think perhaps also for you, John, do we need to worry about the bird nesting season? Do we need a condition?
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't say so. That's covered by separate legislation and the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, and the applicant should be well aware of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on then to debate? Would somebody like to start the debate? Councillor Reid.
So I think there's a number of concerns I heard. But one about the fencing, and it does seem like it's agricultural, and it's my understanding that agricultural land can be fenced by the owner. Whether there can be clarification on what stock fencing could be put there, because if it's 2-bar fencing, then there would be an ability for wildlife to move around, especially with badgers, etc., in the area. If it tends to be sort of a paling type fencing, then the chance of animals being able to move through it would be pretty much impossible unless it's a large deer that can vault it. I'm just wondering if there's something that we could advise the landowner on or put a condition on.
Apologies. I should have pointed out to members, there has been some discussion of that between myself and the applicant has given an email confirming that there's going to be 1.2 metre high stock fencing. I think 3 strands of barbed wire is proposed so that wildlife shouldn't hopefully be affected, or there'll be the minimum effect.
So to me, that sounds like it's 1.2 with 3. That sounds like standard sheep fencing. Okay.
Right, so that's standard what, sorry?
Standard sheep fencing, if we're in the agricultural world.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Kanda.
Is this piece of land adjacent to the land given up as a piece that could be used for further development by the council in a recent request by the central government since the change? There were 4 pieces of land, I understand, that were thrown in the ring for us potentially being able to build more in the next 10
Certainly
or
there was
15 years.
138 homes on the site. I can't remember exactly where they would be though. Can you help us, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid that I can't help you because I haven't been involved in the Pinsons or the local plan examination process to a degree to be able to advise on the location. But I would also caution members that what you're considering here isn't the planning application for development. It is simply an application for tree protection works. So the location of those works is not in any way relevant in terms of those allocations or potential allocations.
Mr. Goddard?
Chairman, I was just going to say that I was involved in the recent local plan hearings, and yes, this site is proposed to be allocated for 165 dwellings, access from Pinsons Lane to the south. But that's, as Mr. Till has just mentioned, a separate issue. Planning application for you tonight is as described.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I remember correctly, there was a planning application we refused a couple of years ago. And I think there was a kind of, the footpath 13 was kind of almost central to that. So I think there was housing on both sides of it, but that's from memory. So. Any, Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. I was just love to hear from the other committee members, their thoughts from hearing from Councillor Taylor, both as parish council and as ward, the width of the path and their concerns on, feeling safe. And just wondering, that's one of the things we as councillors obviously want our ward members and residents feel safe, and whether there could be some sort of discussion maybe with the landowner if that could be accounted for if the fencing was to go up.
I think it's worthwhile just confirming what Councillor Taylor said, that the applicant did say at the site visit that they thought it was, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it seemed that it was entirely possible that they would not go ahead with the fencing. But is there something you can help with, Mr. Taylor, that we can do?
Really, First of all, it's perfectly possible to add an informative to the decision notice regarding the applicant giving consideration to the layout of any potential fencing and visibility lines for members of the public using the rights of way. But the second thing is just a word of caution, which is that in terms of conditioning it, the Town and Country General Permitted Development Order 2015 even, showing my age there, is actually allows for the erection of fencing of up to 2 metres in height where not directly adjacent to a public highway. And in this sort of circumstance, although the public rights of way do constitute a public highway, they don't constitute a public highway for the purposes of administration of that legislation.
Okay, thank you. Any other points? Would someone like to make a proposal? So, sorry, but Councillor.
It's all right, Councillor McCraw. I'm hiding in the corner over here. There's only one councillor here. Everyone else is over the other side, look. I just wanted to express my thoughts really on this application as part of the conversation that Councillor Reid wished to discuss and to open up. I believe that everyone should have the right to use their land. That I do believe. I'm also aware of the walks that go through this particular part of Calcutta, Pinsent Hill. It's very beautiful to walk there. And I believe, and from all the discussions that we've had today, people are right. You know, if you were fenced in, it would be problematic in case you needed to escape or you wanted to go off on a bit of a tangent. My concern that I wish to raise is about free movement of animals. And I do hear what the objectors were saying. When you've got 2 ancient pieces of woodland, that will obviously have deer and other animals. If they are not able to move into their grazing fields, that would obviously be a concern. I don't necessarily, and this might be my understanding of planning, I don't necessarily understand why a fencing is required in separate spaces around the site, rather than saying like a circumference perimeter fence, perhaps, where animals could be shepherded from one ancient piece of woodland to another with maybe entrances into the field, places where you can keep the sheep safe. But again, this is just me sharing my thoughts and hoping to kind of spark a conversation to help the other councillors and maybe myself be able to process thoughts so that we can reach a conclusion on this tonight.
Yeah. Would somebody like to make a proposal?
I wouldn't really know what to propose, I'll be honest. I understand what you're saying, but I also understand the rights of the landowners. And it's like, how do you cater for the free movement of animals unless you actually do build channels all the way through, which is significant cost. And then also in and of itself is still obstructive. But I think I was in a meeting or something 2 or 3 weeks ago where they was talking about trying to build the instances where you could link ancient woodland and the like. I just don't know how we do it, because we couldn't really condition for them to say, well, you're going to have to build a channel through from one end to the other, which isn't the public footpath, because it's basically saying you have to give up a piece of your land, in essence, or don't build a fence at all, which then gets away from them being able to graze animals. So I understand your concerns, I just don't know how.
Sorry, Thomas.
Chairman, apologies to interject. Whilst I was researching this application, I had a look at some Forestry Commission advice, and it was on deer fencing. And they suggested that a muntjac deer could jump a 1.5 metre edge, 1.5 metre fence. So muntjac is the smallest, it's non-native. There are roe deer on site. I've seen about half a dozen at one time. So roe deer can clearly jump 1.2, which is what's proposed here. So I don't know if that helps your discussion at all. And if it's only 3 barbed wire strands, then badgers will be able to get under that again. So I hope that's useful.
I've seen deer jump over a 1 metre high fence that was newly erected. Yes. I was going to ask Mr. if you could advise us, basically, the advice we've had is that they could erect this fencing without planning permission. On the other hand, they have specified in the planning application themselves that they propose to erect fencing. So does that enable us to put any conditions on the fencing or not?
Thank you, Chairman. It's a case where we have to be mindful of the fallback position here, and the fact that the legislation, principal planning legislation here, allows for up to 2 metres of fencing, doesn't specify what sort of fencing, doesn't specify any special provisions for ecology to be erected without requirement for separate planning permission, then would be the fallback position. So conditions in respect of that, my advice would be that those would be onerous. Informatives, on the other hand, which made recommendations for the applicant to explore, would be something that the applicant may take on board, and given the public interest in this, I would suggest they may wish to take on board those recommendations to explore fencing that is more permeable to wildlife.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
So I'm thinking maybe the recommendation is to accept, but with an informative to ask the landowner to look at making sure wildlife permeable fencing, or even if it is sheep fencing, to use temporary electric fencing, which is used commonly in the ward that I'm in. There are open fields all the time with no permanent fencing, and the shepherd just comes along with reels of electric fencing, puts it up for a month. Sheep nibble it all down to the ground, and then the stock is moved on with the sheepdog, and they roll all the electric fencing up and move it onto the new location using batteries as the source of power.
So basically, the proposal is officer's recommendation with an informative asking for the fencing to be permeable to the wildlife.
Yeah, or even temporary, which would be, I think, would be the most attractive to residents and wildlife in the area, which would be, if it's sheep, temporary electric fencing, if possible.
And so there's also a condition in the update sheet. So which would need to, there's an amended condition 3. Okay. Does that proposal find us a seconder, please? Councillor Kanda, thank you. So could members show whether they wish to vote in favour of the proposal, please? So I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So the application is approved subject to the amended condition 3 and also an informative regarding fencing suitable for wildlife. Okay, thank you. We move on then, please, to the third planning application, which is number 24/01163/REG3, age concern the Laburnum Centre, Stirling Way in Thatcham. So I ask Alice Atwood, please, to introduce the application.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the proposal is for a change of use of the Laburnum Centre, which is currently Class 2, which is community use, to Class E, which will be used for West Berkshire Council staff offices. The reason this is before you is because there's more than 10 objections, and officers are recommending that you go to the development manager, be authorised to grant permission. The site is located within the settlement boundary of Thatcham. The site is accessed via Stirling Way.
The development would make use of the existing parking on site, which you can see within the red line boundary. The site is within flood zone 1 and is not in critical drainage area. There's no actual physical works proposed with this application. It's a pure change of use. This is the existing site plan. It's going to be sort of no physical changes. This is the existing floor plan. The Laburnum Centre was built in the 1990s for a charity called Age Concern, and that's why the building falls into the F2 use class for local community use. The building has been vacant for some time, and the change of use to Class E for West Berkshire offices. It's not going to be a public-facing office, and it will be used by the adult social care team. The office hours would be 8 till 6, Monday to Friday. It would not be used at any other time. So that's the building in question. This is just to give you, this is sort of the entrance to the parking area. And then this is a photo of the allocated parking. With smart parking, you can park 8 cars there, which is the existing. For office space, the parking standards are 1 space per 30 square meters. The building is approximately 100 square meters, so it would only require 3 parking spaces, but there are actually sort of 8 spaces, which exceeds the parking standards, and highways have had no objections. As I said, this is within settlement, so there is a sustainable principle there because it's sort of well located. The site has been redundant, and the applicant has demonstrated that there are other community spaces in the local area which can be used for local people. And there has been concerns raised by objectors in regards to parking movements and noise and concern over lighting. However, there is a valid fallback position of F2, which doesn't have any parking restrictions or any restrictions on the time of use. So it would be a more intensive use compared to the office, which conditions can be used to narrow down the time of use. There is street lighting in Stirling Way, which is sufficient to light the car parking area. Yeah, that's all from me, I think. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any additional highways comments, please, Mr. Goddard?
Yes, please, Chairman. Just to reiterate the thorough report that my colleague Alice Atwood mentioned, the number of car parking spaces available complies with your standards. And as mentioned by Alice Atwood, there was a use within the building for some time by the charity Age Concern. They would have had some staff present within the building and would have had visitors coming to and fro during the day, as is the proposal before you, where there will be at least 2 members of staff at present at any given time, and a wider team of an additional 4 or so people that will visit the building between visits to clients during the course of the day. So therefore, there really shouldn't be any increase in car parking demand or traffic movements from what was there before. We understand concerns raised by residents. The parking area is, of course, belong to the site. It's for private use and not necessarily available for residents, although I'm sure that they could use it from time to time upon the applicant's consent. That's all for me. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I have on the list, an objector wishing to speak, but I don't see him in the chamber. So we'll move on then to the applicants. Stacey Bradshaw, George, sorry.
Should we just check outside if the objectors in the lobby bench and it's okay?
Yes, please, yes. We're just checking, make sure that Mr. Ward isn't kind of stuck outside. No? No, we always, we do things and then members can raise any issues that I ask for them to be amplified. No. Okay, thank you very much for checking. Can I call on the applicants then, please? Stacey Bradshaw, Georgie Davis and Gabriel Mancini, please. Would you all like to come to the rostrum? And you have 5 minutes between you. Do you want any kind of division of time?
We're not going to be taking up much of your time at all.
Right.
So we are here just to answer any questions or respond to any objections that aren't here. So yeah, nothing really further to add. Ask away.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any questions, please?
Almost feel like I should ask a question because you've been sitting here for so long, but I have no questions, sorry.
As my understanding is that one of the main objectors from a reason for objection is down to parking. So can you confirm the kind of maximum number of staff that will be there at any one time?
We don't have a confirmation on a maximum number, but the desk capacity is peaked at 9 duty desks, though we don't foresee that being a daily occurrence at all. That would only be if there were team meetings, which don't happen frequently.
Right.
So we'll have at least 2 duty staff in there, and then there will be drop-ins from staff between their client visits. But the parking on site is for 8. Where they currently are, they have 6 spaces, which has been sufficient for them. So we don't see any issue with 8 spaces.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, with that, thank you very much. And Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just on the question of visitors to I'm trying to find the actual section. Yeah, it says it is not a public facing office and that there would be no visitors. I mean, is that something that could change in the future?
No, it will be just staff.
Okay.
Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, you've mentioned there's 8 parking spaces outside the building. I know this may sound like a stupid question, but have we actually checked that there are 8 spaces? Because when I was at the site visit, there were a number of cars parked outside. They were quite close together and there weren't 8. There's sort of 2 separate parking areas separated by a grass verge. I don't know that it's necessarily relevant because it doesn't sound like 8 cars will be parked outside at any one time, but can we actually fit that many parking spaces in? And do we know that for certain?
Yeah, it has been tested. When you were there was a car that was actually one of the neighbours that wasn't parked, what we'd call smart. So with their car, we would have got 2 in their 1 space.
Councillor Lewis.
Nice random question for you, twofold. In the future, you may get staff that need disability space. Has there been a space allocated for that?
We don't have a dedicated disabled parking space on site, but it would be something we can look into if that were to arise. But the team, as it stands currently, has no need for it. And any works that would be done on the building would be disabled inclusive anyway.
Okay, it'd just be nice to reflect and stay on message for what the council being disability friendly. And the other one, just to stay on message for West Berks and sustainable travel. You got bike racks outside. Is there allocation for bike space, cargo bike space, just to keep us on trend?
We don't have bike storage in there currently, but there is a private garden which has sheds in it which are available to use by the staff. So if someone were to cycle to work, they could store it in the bike or in the garden, which is secure and only accessible by staff as well.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Questions for officers? Councillor Pemberton. Oh, sorry. We don't have the ward members, so they're down on the list, but Jeremy Cosper's not here, so we can't hear from him, unfortunately. Sorry, Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I get the impression there is potential for there to be anything up to 6 vehicles parked outside at any one time, but in reality there won't be 6 because you'll have a rotation of staff coming and going. On Councillor Lewis's point, could we perhaps look at conditioning to make one of those spaces disabled?
Yeah. Mr. Goddard?
Well, Chairman, if members wish, but normally, as a rule of thumb, if there's a car park with less than 10 parking spaces, we don't normally ask for a space for disabled persons because we have a ratio of it's about 4%. So therefore, it's sort of below that threshold. But if members feel that it would be useful to have a parking space that could be adapted for someone that's disabled, I would have no objection to that condition. Fine.
Just a little bit concerned that that would kind of reduce the number of spaces for able-bodied, and
it would.
It's open for debate, yeah, but I've just thrown it out there.
But it's maybe something if let's say an employee who is disabled works there in the future, then maybe that's something as with any good employer, it should be looked into at that time.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate. Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Just to take that point up, I think it would also be a good idea to have that space now so that if somebody did start who was disabled, they weren't thinking that they're going to be different or being a nuisance and asking for something additional. But we always say that we are an employer who don't penalise anybody. And I just feel we should stay on brand and make sure there is a space there now.
Any other questions of officers? Thank you. Can we move on then to the debate? Anybody like to start the debate? Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Chair. When I saw the agenda pack today and I saw this through, I thought, oh, age concern, this is going to be for the adult social care team, seeing as West Berkshire is the applicant. As Gabrielle Mancini's here, it's a part of the transformation team. And as the portfolio holder for transformation, I think it would be remiss of me to vote on an agenda item that I have a vested interest in. So apologies, everybody. I didn't realise that I would be not allowed to vote today. I have spoken to legal counsel and I am able to participate in the discussion, just not able to vote. I wish to extend my apologies.
Thank you. Thank you. That's entirely correct. Thank you. Anybody like to? Councillor Pemberton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So subject to the condition that I suggested, I think this is a proposal where we should almost certainly be going with officers' recommendations. The building is empty. It will remain empty until we do something with it. And if the council don't make use of it, presumably it will get sold to someone else and we don't know what will happen with it. So for me, I think this is relatively straightforward and one that we should vote as soon as we can. Thank you.
So are you proposing officers' recommendation?
Officer's recommendation with the insertion of a condition that there should be at least one disabled parking space outside the building.
So find a seconder, Councillor Kander.
Well, it was more. I think preparation for disabled space is one thing. I think having it as a disabled space now, when there is no requirement for it, and limiting the amount of spaces that are available is a problem. So, is there a way whereby we can have it prepared and have it either as a sign that says disabled when required? I don't know. I mean, the wording is wrong, but you get my point, which is there's no point restricting it when it's not actually required at the moment. So is there a way round preparing for it, showing that we're on brand without limiting it to a space that's going to sit empty for 100% of the time at the moment.
I mean, in actual fact, provided there is a space available, it's not very much that because there's only 8 spaces. So even if you're the space furthest away from the access path, you've only got to walk kind of 3 or 4 car widths. So it's not that onerous, really.
I mean, I'd like to think, as it's a small office and they're coming and going, that if somebody was disabled, they would go, oh, I'll move my car, right? As long as there's an appropriate space that can be used.
Can officers' assistance, please?
Chairman, I may need my highways colleagues' nod on this, but I would suggest a condition that says that the building shall not be taken into use until a revised parking plan has been provided that shows a space that fulfills the criteria for disabled access.
That's good.
Chairman, what I would do is, let's say if I was to put a disabled car parking space, and thank you for putting that picture up, Alice, you see that small section of grass verge between the footway and the first parking space. If a disabled parking space to go in, we would widen that parking space and remove that section of grass verge. And then anybody in a wheelchair could then leave the car directly onto the footway, which is there existing next to it. So it can easily be provided. But yeah, if members choose, that's how I would provide a disabled parking space going forward.
Councillor Pemberton.
So, subject to the insertion of the wording suggested by Mr. Till, I would propose that we vote for officers' recommendations.
And
one thing I'd like to say on that is that then going to create a 6-month delay whereby it's going to continue to lay empty and not be used where maybe office space is required? Because like Councillor Paul, I'd like to kind of decide it now and make it so that it's available to them as soon as possible. Is it something that can be done whilst it's also being used? I don't know.
Thank you, Chairman. Alternatively, we could say that a parking plan, revised parking plan, shall be provided within 6 months of the building being taken into use.
Is that acceptable to the proposer? Thank you. And you're seconding, yeah. Okay, thank you. So the proposal is to officer's recommendation, subject to a parking plan being drawn up within 6 months of the first occupation, allowing for disabled access. Could everybody in favour of that proposal please show? And we note your abstention. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we move on then to the 4th planning application, which is 24/00955/FUL Purley Park Trust in Purley on Thames. And could I ask Alice Atwood to introduce the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this application is a retrospective change of use of Westland area of approximately about 200 square metres to provide cars, parking spaces up to 6 cars and removal of a storage shed and derelict greenhouse. The applicant is the Purley Park Trust, and this application has been brought before you because there's been more than 10 objections. And my recommendation is to refer to the development manager to grant planning permission subject to conditions. So the application site is within the settlement boundary of Purley on Thames. The site is accessed by Huckleberry Close, and the site is also in floodstone 1 and not in a critical drainage area. To the site, south of the site, there is a row of trees, and these are covered by a TPO. To the west of the site, there is a closed boarded fence. And to the north, there are houses which are occupied by adults with learning difficulties. Because the Purley Park Trust is a care site for adults with learning difficulties. The car park has already begun and is largely complete. And it's needed for to help facilitate the running of the care facility. So just to show you, this is a sort of pre-alteration plan, and you can sort of see the building on the south, which was removed. And this is the sort of extension. You can see it's a sort of parking extension just there. So this is a long range view of the car park in general, where you see the sort of two trees with a fence across. It's everything beyond that point. And you can also see the sort of neighbouring houses in that photo as well. This is a close-up of the extension to the car park. And then this is just to give a bit of context, sort of with the nearby sort of neighbouring properties. Again, sort of just a close-up, just so you can see if you were sort of standing in the extension looking back to the neighbouring properties. So like I said, the car park is within Purley-on-Thames, so there is a presumption in favour of development. The land is considered to be previously developed. We have a tree condition in place because there are still trees near where the car park has been laid, and it's a tree condition to make sure the root protection zones have been properly protected. I don't believe it really affects the character and appearance of the immediate site. It's quite localized. It's in an urban area. It doesn't stand out. There has been some objections with regards to noise, but we've suggested a noise management plan to be conditioned because the objections kind of was more about noise from contractors and things, and a management plan was the best way to balance the needs of care facility with also sort of neighbours, and make sure that it's all appropriately managed. Highways have no objections to this application. There is a grade 2 listed building, but it's 40 metres away, and this doesn't have any sort of bearing on its setting or anything like that. And it's needed to sort of facilitate the running of the care facility and help. There has been previous parking issues on the site, and this is helping to alleviate those. That's everything from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you have any additional highways comments, please, Mr. Goddard?
No, Chairman. I think my colleague Alice Atwood has mentioned all that needs to be mentioned. No further comments. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any objectors or the applicant or supporters to speak. Ward members, councillors Kander and Lewis, the local members, would you like to address the committee, please? You have 5 minutes between you if you wish to. Okay, thank you. Ed. Are there any questions for officers, please? Councillor Lewis.
I am familiar with the site. In fact, I used to work at Purley Park many, many years ago when it was originally in the old S. One of the things we had a problem with was the roots becoming exposed. So what's the impact of the roots being exposed and disrupting the lay of the car park? Is it going to be something that can easily be remedied? Is it something that will impact on the root protection? It's just a few concerns around that, but not a massive big deal. It's just understanding.
Mr. Till, can you help us on that? Oh, sorry, Alice.
Thank you, Chair. So the condition is for an agricultural report, but also there are extra triggers in that condition. So the report will look into what's been done on site, but then there's second triggers for mitigation and compensation. So potentially there might need to be remedial work to make sure that there is longevity there, or it might be the case that the works carried out are okay, but because there's those triggers for mitigation and compensation, it sort of does cover the long term of, you know, while that car park's there, they will need to, and the fact that there's TPOs there, you do have to look after these trees, and you know, make sure they're kept well. So hopefully that helps.
How would you describe the surfacing that's there at the moment? It's kind of.
I would describe it as a sort of semi-permanent. They're sort of, it's kind of a semi-permanent. I don't know if you can sort of see it in that tiny corner there. It's a semi-permeable. It is partly loose, and that is partly they've chose this for the trees. So yeah, it is type 1. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Does that help you? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any? Councillor Kanda.
It's on the restrictions of times. Is that because that's the hours of operation and nothing, and no one's expected to be there outside of those hours? Do we know?
I spoke to the applicant, the trust, and we had sort of neighbour objections as well, and I think those were suggested hours, because I think the main objections of this was people slamming car doors at night because they do have carers sort of going in and
That's
out.
what I was thinking. It looks like a 24/7.
However,
facility,
I
right?
think there is slightly, my understanding was there's less people there at night than there is in the day, so they don't actually need that extra capacity at night. So that's why they were happy to agree those sort of hours.
Am I right in thinking they were intending kind of admin staff to park there rather than carers?
Yes, that was that's the sort of thinking about who's, I think this admin and a few contractors that would only be there in the day.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just a question really on the noise issue. I've noticed that Purley Parish Council was suggesting possible, I think, resurfacing of the car park to reduce the noise. Yet when I look at the, you know, but one of my questions is, you know, could that be a solution to the noise problem? Because I don't see that specifically mentioned anywhere when I look at section 6, the noise management plan.
So you have to strike a balance here, because if you were to do tarmac or something, that's going to harm the TPO trees. So you have to kind of try and balance protecting them and neighbourhood amenity. I think a lot of the objections were, yes, it was to do with the vehicle movements. But also it was a lot to do with sort of like hearing people talking and things like that. So I feel like the noise management plan sets out where the sensitive receptors are, and you can do sort of like other mitigation methods to help with the sound and how it's sort of reverberating out. But I think you also, with conditions, you've got to have an element of what's proportional. And if they're only using this in the day in sociable hours in an urban area, you know, it wouldn't be proportional to try and have a almost silent area, because that's not the soundscape that's already there.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Kanda.
The only query I've got then is there's a mention of a light. So is that a light that's specific over the new area, or is it over the general car park?
So no lighting was a part of this scheme. And I didn't see any lighting when I was there, but what I've done is I put on a lighting condition so that all external lighting details will have to be submitted to us first.
Okay.
So we can check that they're sort of going to be downlit if they needed. But again, they shouldn't really need lighting if they're only going to be using it in sort of the daytime hours. But that the lighting condition 9 should cover. It gives us
Okay.
some control.
Yeah. I mean, it's dark from 4 o'clock at the moment, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I know it doesn't change how we approach this application, but is there any reason in particular why it's retrospective? I mean, obviously the applicant is a charity, which presumably has a board of trustees and all the rest of it, whom we might reasonably expect to know when they do and don't need planning. So I'm just curious as to the background as to how we've got here in this order.
I think it's a little bit beyond our scope, isn't it, Mr. Till?
Yeah, without venturing into the realms of pure speculation, for example, there are permitted development rights for commercial organisations to put hard standing down on their land. So I am not surprised to find an applicant confused as to when they can't apply those permitted development rights. Also, resurfacing is often considered de minimis in planning terms, so wouldn't require a planning application. It's not as cut and dried as you'd think, and the number of people who fall over on something which is for relatively minor works is quite a lot. This one's one that you've ended up with at committee, but we see this sort of thing a hell of a lot in planning applications. Thank you.
Any other questions? Who would like to lead off the debate? Councillor Lewis.
I propose we accept the office's recommendation and move forward.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder?
I'm happy to second on the basis no one else wants to talk anymore.
Thank you very much. Does anybody wish to speak on the application at all? Okay. In that case, the proposal is officer's recommendation. Please show if you want to vote for it. Sorry, get myself my tongue tied. Okay, that's approved. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that concludes the business of the committee. Thank you very much, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.